Hey guys, welcome to VA Friyay. So today we're going to redo a video I've done in the past about how to basically build a real estate portfolio with your VA home loan. Because there's a lot of people out there that don't know that you can do it this way. So before I get right into it, I'm going to do a quick dad joke for you guys. This one is, what kind of car does Jesus drive? What kind of car does Jesus drive? A Chrysler. Chrysler. Get it? Pew pew. All right. So I've done multiple videos about this in the past, but I want to kind of do a more updated version and kind of just try my best to consolidate everything together. If you guys have heard my story, you guys know that you can use your VA loan multiple times as well as have multiple VA loans at the same time. Now, these are, if you know the rules and you know how to play by the rules within the rules, then you can better understand on how to use your VA loan to build a real estate portfolio. And what I mean by that is getting a number of homes that you can turn that you've bought with your VA loan that turned into rentals. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. So essentially buying a home and another home and another home. So you built this rental portfolio that was built by this amazing VA home loan benefit. But the question is, how does it work? So first we want to understand is that we need to understand where you're buying the next house. So let's say you've already bought a house and we're looking to buy the next house, and your intent is to keep the current house and turn it into a rental. Now, with the house that you're turning into a rental, you don't have to do anything with it financially. You don't have to refinance it, you don't have to do anything with it. As long as you lived in it for about a year or two, you can easily just rent it out as long as you've lived in it for at least a year, 2 years. There's really not an actual time limit per se per the VA, but the recommended timeline is at least 12 months. So live in at least 12 months before you decide to buy another house with your VA loan, which you may in turn it to another rental if you like. So getting right into this is how it all works. So with, let's say you bought a house maybe, you know, 4 years ago with your VA loan, and this house is in Bremerton, Washington, right? You bought this house for $250,000. Let's say you got PCS orders, or you're moving to, or got a job order to, or sorry, a job offer or transferred to Honolulu, Hawaii. Okay, so the plan is to keep this Bremerton, Washington house and rent it out. Okay, again, you don't have to do anything with it financially. You just find a property manager, rent it out, good to go. But you don't even need a rental and be able to close the transaction. We're just kind of talking about, we're not gonna go into the details of what you need to have as far as the transaction goes, but I want to show you the opportunities that the VA loan allows you to have. So with us knowing that you're going to Honolulu, Hawaii, what we need to look at is the county loan limit of Honolulu, Hawaii. Okay, so this is where you're going to. We look at the county loan limit of where you're going to. The county loan limit in Honolulu, Hawaii is about $1,209,750. Okay, with that in mind, you have a budget about $925,000 in Hawaii. Okay, so what we need to figure out is how much you have left on your entitlement. You're in a situation where if you are going to have more than one VA loan at the same time, which is in this case, then you are called partially entitled. Now, if you were to sell this Bremerton, Washington house before you bought, the day before you fully bought the Honolulu, Hawaii house, then you're called what's fully entitled. Then this calculation doesn't matter anymore. But we're talking the case that you're trying to build a rental portfolio, have multiple homes, and then maybe after you leave this Hawaii house, you intend on renting this house out. Okay. Now, once we kind of figure out what the county loan limit, we look at what's been used. So per the VA, what we have to look at is how much the house price was, not what you owe on it now. Of course, the refinance is another timeline that we have to figure out. So if you refinance, we look at the refinanced amount. So let's just say you didn't refinance, you bought the house for $250,000. So the quick math is we take the county loan limit and subtract from it the house price. So going into Honolulu, Hawaii, we have about $960 left to buy a house zero down in Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, if you were to go to some place like where it has a lower county loan limit, for this year of 2025, it's $806,500. So if you went to, let's say, I don't know, Georgia, where it's $806,500, you will most likely be buying a house for about $650,000, roughly. No, sorry, $550,000. That's about how much you would have left on your VA loan to buy a house zero down. Keyword that this remaining entitlement calculation tells us that whatever is remaining from to where you're going to, that's what's left to go zero down. Okay. So if you're looking at a house for 925 or anything less than that, you can do so zero down as long as you can afford the mortgage payment. Now, a couple things to note. When you intend on having a rental property or you do have rental properties, you must have 3 months of mortgage payments in reserves for each property. Meaning you have, let's say your mortgage payment on that Bremerton house is $1,500 a month. You need to have about $4,500 set aside that's going to be in your account after closing. Okay. You're going to have this account after closing. So if you have multiple accounts, if you have multiple homes, then it'd be 3 months reserves for each house that you have after closing. So, but what's cool is that with the current situation as it is now, and depending on which lender you work with, we may or may not need a lease for the Bremerton house in order to offset the mortgage, because we can. There are ways where you don't have to use a lease. You can offset the mortgage of the Bremerton, Washington house, such that that mortgage payment doesn't count against you with your buying power in Honolulu, Hawaii. Okay, so can you buy this $925,000 house in Hawaii? You totally can, as long as you can afford the mortgage payment. And then now you will have 2 active VA loans on your VA home loan, at least on your eligibility. Now, another thing I want to go into is that let's say you want to buy a house well past a little bit above or just above what you have left in your entitlement. So if we look back, we know that 975 is higher than 960, right? So that's more than what you have left for Hawaii specifically. So you can go conventional, put in 10 to 20% down, which is a lot of money. But if you go VA, what we need to figure out is your down payment requirement at that point. It's not so much of at this point we're going in the opposite direction and figuring out instead of figuring out how much you have zero down, we're going to figure out how much down payment you have, how much down payment you need to close on, let's say, a $975,000 house. So we do some quick math and we subtract the purchase price, and out of that purchase price, we subtract out what the remaining entitlement in Hawaii will be, which is about $15,250. What the VA says is that your down payment's based on 25% of that difference. So, which makes your down payment a little over $3,800, which is way better than $15,000, right? Or even $175,000. So this is what you have to come out of pocket at a minimum. Let's say you got your closing costs paid for. So, but keep in mind, once you've done this, you are pretty much tapped out of your VA, because most counties do not have a county loan limit, are not going to have a county loan limit past 1.2 this year. So you are tapped out of your VA loan. Now, there's 2 ways to restore what you've used on your VA loan. One is to sell the property, and one is to do what's called a one-time restoration. Now, one-time restoration is a very kind of a scary tool. It is an option, but I highly recommend doing this as kind of a last resort. One-time restoration is a 2-step process. So what you would need to do in a one-time restoration is you need to choose one house, and you generally want to choose the house that has the most equity, at least 25% equity. So if you bought a house for $50,000, you want the house to be worth at least about $75,000 or more, because you need 25% equity. So the reason why you want 25% equity is because you would have to refinance that home into a non-VA loan. Typically, you're in a conventional loan. So ideally, you want to be a conventional primary loan. So you're not in a conventional investment loan rates. Conventional primary rates are a little bit better than investment. So you refinance that home into a conventional primary mortgage. Now, I need to be very clear about this. Refinancing a VA loan into a non-VA loan is not it doesn't restore your entitlement. It's not, because in order to change in order to restore your entitlement, the reason why selling is a way to restore it is because it's a change of ownership. Okay, that's the key word. So refinancing a VA loan into a non-VA loan will not restore your entitlement. At least it's not supposed to. I've seen it in cases where it has, and you're not supposed to have it, but I'm not going to say anything. So with that in mind, let's say you refinance it into a conventional mortgage. then you apply for a one-time restoration. Okay, you only get one time and one property to restore that's no longer on a non-VA loan that was on a VA loan. So in that case, you would do a one-time restoration on the property you just refinanced, and that portion that was tied to that property would get restored, and that's it. You only get one time to do that. I need, again, refinancing a VA loan into a non-VA loan will not restore your entitlement, at least it's not supposed to. How do I know this? One, it's in the guidelines. Two, I personally have been, I guess, lack of a better term, screwed over because someone told me it does by just doing the refinance. Turns out it does not. It's not, at least not supposed to, again. So those are ways to kind of restore your entitlement. Now, if you're in a situation where you're fully entitled, which means you currently by the time you close on the buy of the house, you will have no other VA loans. That VA loan is going to be the only VA loan, then you're considered fully entitled. Okay. So that means there's no limits as far as how much that goes. But for the purpose of this video, what we're talking about is how do you build a portfolio? So, it's really hard on the West Coast because home prices are so high. So typically on the West Coast side, home prices are much higher. So it's really hard to buy a house with your VA loan and have multiples. Okay. You might have one or two at best, but it's really hard on the West Coast because home prices are so high. It's more of an equity game. So which means you buy a house, you gain a bunch of equity, you sell it, make a bunch of money, more so than you would be in the Midwest or the South. And then you cash in on those profits and maybe buy another house and continue the equity game, and then you can use the profits on the sell of the house to buy another investment property using an investment loan, not a VA loan. Now, what's nice is that if you do live in the South or the Midwest, home prices are significantly lower, almost third of the price. So you have 200, 250s, 300. You can buy probably 3 or 4 of those before you even max out on your VA loan. And then the idea is that maybe you take the home that's the oldest, maybe it's been 10 years since you bought that home, maybe it has a decent amount of equity. You sell that home, restores your VA, and then you can continue to use the restored portion of that VA loan and maybe not have to touch that one-time restoration at all. So you kind of keep doing that process and building more equity at the same time you're renting out these properties, increasing your cash flow. And then when you're selling those properties, yes, you're going to lose the cash flow, but the idea is that you can take the equity, put it into another piece of investment or property, and maybe increase the cash flow that you previously had. Just gives you more opportunities. So yes, you can have multiple VA loans. It's not based on how many VA loans you have. It's based on the dollar amounts that you have used and what you have left based on where you're going. Now, what's really cool if you're in a situation where your spouse is also a veteran who's also eligible for the VA loan. So what's cool there is that you almost have double the power. You can't really say you can combine and you double your VA benefit, not in that case, but what you can happen is you can alternate who buys the next house. I know a military couple who are Coast Guard, I think they're officers now, but when they were starting to work with me, I was able to help them buy their 4th house, and each of them already had, I think it was their 6th house, but each of them already had 2 homes under their name. And then at the end, they actually combined their VA because they didn't really have enough left. So I think at that point, they bought 7 homes between the 2 of them nationally. They're able to refinance using the VA streamline. So those are ways you can actually build your real estate portfolio using the VA home loan. Okay. Again, the one-time restoration, I would really hold off on that just because it's it's not the best option, not always, just because generally if you refinance into a conventional loan, that rate is typically a little bit higher than VA rates at that time. So it depends on how that profit margin is going to treat you. So I would always recommend just using your VA loan as max as you can. And then right before, about 4 to 5 months before you buy the next house, consider your portfolio and how much equity each property has. Because you might find a property one of your oldest properties might be, making $200 a month, but you have $100,000 worth of equity. So in that case, it might make sense to liquidate that property, sell it, cash in on that 100K. Hopefully, maybe you've met the capital gains requirements, and throw that into another investment property while you buy a primary residence with your VA home loan. So imagine buying two properties in 1 year. Because you made $100,000 on the sell of the property and to sell the property, restore what you've used on your VA loan, and then you go to the next house. You have enough on your VA loan to go zero down on the next property, and then you buy the investment property afterwards, right? Or you put it in somewhere that makes you money, or it works for you somehow, some way. So there's so many ways to kind of more or less skin the cat as far as when it comes to building a real estate portfolio. But one of the things I would consider is that you are going to be a landlord. So you can have property managers to help manage it, and you just got to have the appetite for risk. Now a lot of people want that and want that lifestyle, and that's okay. Some people just rather have the equity game where they buy, they sell, they buy, they sell, they buy, they sell. Some people will try it out and give it their best shot and maybe not be their thing. So it just depends on your strategy and what your goals are in the world of real estate investing. But you can, in fact, have more than one VA loan at one time. Again, it's just based on where you're moving to, because we're looking at the county loan limit, how much you've used, and can you even rent enough for it to make sense. I know for me personally, I've read around, and about $100 to $200 a door is pretty good profit. If you're able to profit between property management fees, utilities, whatever you're paying for with the mortgage, if you're able to rent and profit for about $100 to $200 a month, that's pretty good because it's an accumulation game, and it's going to take years to build this real estate portfolio. Most of your cash and profits are going to be earned through equity. So that's something to consider when you're trying to evaluate portfolio in whether if you should liquidate some properties in order to help buy your next deal. I know some people have a strategy where they buy as many properties as they can, hold it for about 5 or 6, 7 years, based on the most recent sale, and they'll liquidate everything and then take all the profits and then buy the apartment building or buy the bigger building or buying the property that has that at least matches the same cash flow, that has potential to grow, and then use their VA loan for the house. Or you just maybe you cashed in on so much equity, you've made enough to not have a mortgage on the next house, which will be amazing too. So there's just so many ways to really skin this cat, depending on how you want to go about it. And times can change. You can make a decision now, and by the time you end up having to make that decision, you may completely change your goals, and that's okay. I'd say always just leave room for that flexibility of how that works out. I'm always a big fan of how do I maximize the cash? Is it the best way to go about it? I kind of flip back and forth depending on what the deal itself. So if you guys, I posted a blog on my duplex and my commercial property. I think that's part 3 of my story, so you can feel free to check that out. But yeah, you can build a real estate portfolio as long as you have the right team to advise you, and you know what your goals are. So otherwise, that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully this made sense. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to schedule a chat on my website, and I'd love to talk to you more about it. Otherwise, nuke out.